Hello, welcome to the France 24 interview. Well, there's an old Chinese proverb, or perhaps a curse, may you live in interesting times. And my guest today, Dimitris Christopoulos, is a man who undoubtedly is living in interesting times, especially given his job. Dimitris Christopoulos has been since late August. He was elected the head of the International Federation for Human Rights. And you can imagine by its title that he has been a very busy man because fear, insecurity right now in Europe, in the U.S., across the world is really testing people's basic commitment to human rights in the face of waves of migration, fears of terrorism, and also the rise of a new brand and a very potent brand of populist politics. Welcome to our studios here.
Thank you very much.
Like I said, you've been a busy man. You've had no honeymoon. You've had to hit the ground running, as they say. I want to start right here in France, because people often assume, oh, human rights. Well, there are human rights, obviously, in France. It's the lands of liberté, égalité, fraternité. There's been a state of emergency in this country right now. It's been prolonged 3 times. It's now been prolonged again. You are very much adamantly against it. You see it as a trampling of basic human rights, or at least an infringement. Tell us what most scares you or even shocks you about this.
What is the most shocking first is the fact that we have a 3 times extension of this state of emergency without particular justification. So in our eyes, this is unjustified. In the second place, what is really troubling is that this is a really very bad message to the rest of the world by France, the mother of fraternité, liberté. Last but not least, what is extremely shocking is the fact that the exception becomes the rule. So the state of emergency should be an exception.
But let me ask you this. What do you say to someone who's watching your answer right now and says, well, that's easy for you to say, Dimitris. If you were living in France, facing this clear and present, and you are living in France, facing this terrorist threat, we heard it yesterday from the new prime minister, to protect the French is the highest priority. Easy to talk about human rights, but shouldn't security come first?
Obviously, security is a concern for all of us, and I'm the last to say that security is not an issue. But what I'm saying is that, after all, we need to be able to strike the balance between liberty and security in a way which will not undermine liberty and security together. Because it's not only about liberty. What I see here is that if the state of emergency becomes the norm, the routine of French politics, then I don't see why security will be in better hands. Trust me.
It's interesting because when we talk about security, and we're obviously in the state of emergency, it's cases of terrorism, it's all becoming mixed and intertwined with the migration crisis, the immigrant. You're from Greece. You're from a country that knows better than almost anyone in Europe what it has been like to deal with the migration problem. You've seen it on the front lines. How do you think France has been handling it? We just saw the dismantling of the so-called jungle camp in Calais. Where have all of those migrants gone? Do you think France is treating them properly?
I think that I would expect more from France, to be honest. I expect responsibility and European solidarity, which has not been the case until today. I think that the European leaders are hiding the problem. So the more we hide the problem, the more we will face a more serious problem. And this is what's happening with migrants and refugees today. No one wants to deal with the matter. Everybody wants to throw the ball to the other side.
Everyone wants to punt it somewhere else.
Exactly. Of course, we need to make the exception of Germany, because Germany has undertaken the responsibility of hosting 1 million people, which is not the case in France, which is not the case in most of the other European countries. So I think what is at stake today here, it is solidarity. It is equal proportional burden sharing between the European nations. Otherwise, we cannot do it. And at the end, living together means that we need to share this obligation.
I want to ask you about this, what was at the time, and still is, a very controversial agreement signed between the European Union and Turkey back in March, essentially for Europe to send migrants back to Turkey, ones who come up to your country, in particular Greece, onto the shores from Turkey, send them back in return for some help in dealing with them on Turkish soil. You are really against that deal. You think it should be absolutely abrogated.
I believe that it's a non-operational deal. It does not function because actually people are coming to Greece and they are stuck there in the islands. So we have a huge problem in the Greek islands today. And I think that this is a very, very bad message sent to Turkey. You should see how the Turks react after this. I mean, they become more arrogant because they see that they can blackmail the European Union. They very well do it. Because at the end, you cannot expect from Turkey and Greece to become the buffer states of the European Union. you need, as I said before,
The
to share
solidarity.
exactly responsibility. Otherwise,
but it's also, and I think we've reported this before, it's also a basic flouting. It's a violation of international law, isn't it, under the Geneva Conventions?
I'm trying to be very realist and pragmatic here. Of course, it's a violation of the international law. Of course, it's a violation of the Geneva Conventions. Let me remind you that it took us 2 wars in the 20th century, 2 world wars in the 20th century, to arrive to the state of the Geneva Conventions. It took us 1 million refugees to forget it.
And you have said it's really, I think you phrased it as a moment of panic in Europe is now leading Europe to destroy almost 200 years of long-established human rights values.
It is this moral panic that I see everywhere in Europe because 1 million and 1.5 million refugees will enter, and so on. And so what? What is the real problem here? What they say to us is that there is no alternative to this. Otherwise, the extreme right is coming, the far right is coming. But the far right is coming exactly because the mainstream European elites are imitating its own policy. So the more you seem like the beast, the more you become the beast.
How do you get your message across? Like I said, your organization groups, I think you're in 180 countries or more. Yeah. You're all over the world. How do you get your message across to a country like Hungary, to a country, to countries Slovakia, to the Czech Republic, to those who are not inclined or not taking any of these refugees? They don't want them.
Interesting times, as you said. Difficult times. It's very difficult because in a big part in the Central Europe, we have what the Hungarian prime minister called himself illiberal democracies. So we're talking about a new era of democracy in Europe. So these are, of course, hard times for human rights defenders. The message is clear. The message is togetherness is built in solidarity and responsibility. Should we avoid that? Should we get rid of all international law protecting human rights, which has been the basis of our coexistence? Then we live in chaos. Then we live in a situation of insecurity. So I am for security. I know what it is to be secure. And I think that security is the condition of my freedom. That is why I do not see security and freedom as two contrasting entities.
You see them as going together. We've been talking about Europe, obviously, but there's a big 900-pound gorilla across the Atlantic in the U.S. right now. We're in the age of the advent of Donald Trump. He will be the president in a little over a month of the U.S. He says he wants to be the president of all Americans. A lot of minorities are not really ready to give him the benefit of the doubt. How do you feel about Donald Trump? How do you think he's going to be on the human rights front? Do you think he knows about human rights?
I don't think he cares. I don't think he cares. I think he regards human rights as an irreasonable luxury, or even as an enemy to business. And I think we will have a problem, obviously.
You say we. Do you mean the United States is going to have a problem, or is it going to be
the world? The world. So what happens in the United States does not affect only the United States. So if you ask me my view, I know that in the discourse of Donald Trump, the idea of the people is highly appreciated, the people and so on. But after all, it's not the people, some elements of the people. So where are minorities? Where are homosexuals? Where are women? Where are black people? Where are Spanish? Where are all the others? So it's after all, this populist exclusionary discourse is based on an idea of division of the people, not in the idea of unity of the people. And this is what is the most troubling about the discourse of the new American president.
Could you give me an idea concretely? You're based all over the world. How many offices, how many people do you actually have on the ground in the United States, your federation?
The federation has in every country, it's in different organizations who are members of the federation. And in the US, we have 2 organizations that are working in New York and Los Angeles, and they're following closely what are the latest developments.
Following closely. So do they have some sort of strategy right now to sort of keep up vigilance, to try to get that message across strongly?
I'm sure that my colleagues are doing the best all day and all night in order to keep the message alive, because we are talking about human rights defenders all around the world, and very soon I think we will be talking about the fate of human rights defenders in the U.S.
In the very briefly, we have very little time left. I wanted to ask you about the issue of war crimes and pursuing people for war crimes. You mentioned the case here in France before we went on air of right now the French court has accepted a case involving war crimes. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
The FIDH, the International Federation for Human Rights, is very, very strong in leading cases before the international tribunals or before national criminal authorities, which is the case, for example, in France here, we have the case of the disappearance of 2 French Syrian citizens by the Assad regime. And this case had been brought before the French justice as a crime against humanity. So, you know, we are, as you said, in interesting times, difficult times, transitions. In these transitions, we must speak about justice. Because if instead of justice there is impunity, then what follows will be chaos.
You have a very tough job, Dimitris Christopoulos. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes right now, but I do thank you for spending a little bit of time talking to us about sort of the tests against human rights right now in the world. And you are the president of the International Federation for Human Rights, new to that job. A lot of work ahead. Thank you very much for being here today.
I thank you very much for the invitation.
Thanks to all of you for watching the interview here on France 24.